If you clicked hoping to see Mirages chasing Skyhawks over Karachi, you're in the right place. Just not for the reason you think. This video breaks down how that dogfight never actually took place, and how a burning tanker named Irene Sincerity became the centerpiece of an extraordinary US Navy search and rescue mission. By the end, you'll see how misreported combat myths can erase the real complexity of naval operations. Most people first come across the so-called Battle of Karachi in aviation forums where Mirage III's and A-4 Skyhawks trade missiles over the Arabian Sea. The story carries surface credibility because those aircraft types actually operated in that region, and because May 1981 was an active period of naval traffic across the Indian Ocean. Geography, timing, and recognizable aircraft names combine into a framework that feels authentic enough to circulate. Myths of this kind often form when small details appear to align, giving a sense of documentation that never existed. The basic claim describes a brief but intense dogfight west of Karachi, with both sides suffering losses. Yet even a modest exchange of fire would have left some trace in flight logs, radar intercept records, or international news agencies that tracked air incidents in the early 1980s. None exist. A Review of Naval Maritime Events, 1981. A comprehensive chronology of naval activity contains no reference to any clashes between Mirages and Skyhawks. The omission is striking because this same document lists routine matters like aircraft mishaps and towing operations, so an actual air battle would certainly have been recorded. One factor sustaining the rumor was the confusion of aircraft identity at sea. The U.S. Navy operated F-14 Tomcats and A-7 Corsair IIs from carriers transiting the area, while nearby air forces flew Mirages and Skyhawks of their own. Observers could easily transpose one for another, especially when seen at distance against ocean haze. A single misinterpreted visual report could see dozens of retellings once repeated through newsletters and later online discussions. By mid-May 1981, the carrier USS America had entered the region after passing the Suez Canal, and the nuclear-powered cruiser USS California maintained escort duties. That legitimate movement of vessels toward the central Arabian Sea matched the notional timing of the fabricated air confrontation, making the fiction harder to disprove in casual conversation. When people heard of carrier sorties and saw flight operations logged during those same dates, they inferred combat where there had been none. The archival silence from official U.S. command chronologies extends beyond the absence of gun camera film or intercepted transmissions. Even diplomatic cables and Allied monitoring centers reported no unusual military activity near Karachi. What filled the gap instead were small press items in independent magazines eager to frame each naval deployment as Cold War brinkmanship. With limited verifiable data, editors often recast operational exercises or unidentified maritime events as confrontations. The resulting sketches of Mirages versus Skyhawks served as convenient metaphors for East-West rivalry, even if purely imaginary. In reality, the event that drew attention southwest of Karachi was neither interception nor combat. It was a major rescue operation. On May 16th, according to Naval Maritime Events 1981, an S-3A Viking from the USS America located the burning merchant vessel Irene Sincerity about 180 miles offshore. The USS California diverted to the site and recovered 39 survivors in heavy seas. That was the true episode misread as an air battle. And as it turns out, the precision of the Navy's coordinated response would matter far more than any mythic dogfight ever could. How does a burning merchant tanker, adrift nearly 200 miles from Karachi, become a showcase for precise carrier coordination? The answer begins with the distress signal from the Irene Sincerity, a call received by the carrier USS America and immediately routed through the regional command net. At that range, no shore-based aircraft could respond quickly enough. The task fell to an S-3A Viking already airborne on routine reconnaissance, whose endurance and sensor suite made it capable of covering ocean sectors that other carrier aircraft could not. The Viking's crew operated under tight fuel margins, At cruising altitude, the platform could survey a wide radius, but endurance calculations left little redundancy for loitering over an uncertain datum. The S-3A's search radar picked up faint anomalies through the haze, while its optical sensors detected intermittent heat signatures far below expectation, suggesting a smoldering structure rather than a live vessel. With the horizon distorted by convection currents, confirmation required multiple passes. Each orbit refined the coordinates that would later guide a surface unit to the scene. Distance alone created complexity. The Irene Sincerity was positioned well beyond the practical limit for immediate rescue helicopters, so the Viking had to function as both spotter and first-stage responder. Smoke reduced visibility even from altitude, and the drift of oil and debris altered the apparent position every hour. Navy procedures demanded updates to the fleet satellite communications link, sending digital coordinates back to the carrier's Combat Information Center. Those data flowed within minutes to the nuclear-powered cruiser USS California, which received orders to detach from formation and proceed to the reported location at sustained flank speed. This redirection process illustrated how 7th Fleet doctrine translated flexible command intent into motion. Communications officers aboard the America coordinated not only bearing updates but fuel state recalculations for the Viking, ensuring its recovery window remained viable. Simultaneously, the California's operations team evaluated sea state, isolation distance from support craft, and the potential presence of hazardous vapors. Because the burning tanker carried significant petroleum reserves, secondary explosions remained a valid concern throughout the approach phase. Technically, what distinguished this response was the way the Viking's radar sweep integrated with its infrared line scanner to deliver a rapid localization cycle. Older reconnaissance aircraft relied on visual triangulation, often taking hours to define a search grid. In this instance, the S-3A established a fix in less than half that time, exploiting the contrast between hot plumes and surrounding cooler water. A capability primarily intended for anti-submarine tracking, but here repurposed for rescue operations. By the time USS California arrived, the tanker's structure had collapsed amidships, yet several lifeboats remained intact. The crew's survival depended on accurate positional data transmitted earlier, which placed the cruiser within visual range before darkness. The recovery tally, 39 men alive, confirmed how that day's mission embodied coordination rather than conflict. And yet, this rescue was only part of a wider sequence of naval posturing that turned the northern Indian Ocean into a proving ground for extended-reach doctrine. If no bombs were dropped, why maintain such a visible presence within sight of Karachi's commercial lanes? By May 1981, the Navy was already sustaining one of its longest continuous operations in the Indian Ocean since the Vietnam drawdown. Earlier that month, an amphibious force carrying roughly 1,800 Marines entered through the Strait of Malacca to reinforce existing groups. In the same cycle, the logistics ship Niagara Falls supported those units with replenishment runs stretching from Diego Garcia to the northern Arabian Sea. The route itself, thousands of miles of open ocean, required deliberate synchrony among escort vessels, oilers, and command platforms. Every entry and departure carried both a tactical and a political message. The operational tempo intensified through multinational exercises. Beacon South 81-2 began off Australia in early May, assembling approximately 10 ships, 100-plus aircraft, and several thousand personnel from the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. Only a week later, Beacon Express 81 initiated a second phase farther north with the USS Midway Battle Group. These events formed part of a pattern intended less for combat rehearsal than for demonstrating Allied interoperability across wide distances. In official summaries, they appear sequential, but participants described them as one extended distribution of naval presence from Fremantle to the Arabian coast. American planners read the Indian Ocean as a critical buffer between Soviet naval deployments from Vladivostok and the oil transit routes through Hormuz. So while the Irene Sincerity rescue looked humanitarian in isolation, it also served as a verification of strategic reach. An S-3A Viking detecting a burning freighter over 180 miles from the coast was effectively proving the same sensor-to-response chain expected in a wartime scenario. The USS California's diversion under 7th Fleet Authority demonstrated how surface and air commands shared targeting data through real-time satellite links. That throughput, digital rather than voice relay, represented doctrine in action. Karachi's proximity added a diplomatic dimension. The survivors were eventually landed there, requiring liaison with port officials while maintaining operational security for nuclear-powered vessels nearby. This interaction blurred the line between rescue coordination and theater engagement. It illustrated how visible readiness could double as soft power, substituting cooperation for deterrence while still signaling competence. The same posture extended to later deployments, notably during the introduction of the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine later in 1981, whose trial cruises were evaluated partly against responsiveness standards refined during the Irene Sincerity mission. Under Cold War conditions, visible non-combat success could communicate capability more efficiently than confrontation. Allied navies interpreted it as reassurance that U.S. forces could render assistance across an ocean's breadth, whereas adversaries measured it as evidence of global endurance. Such outcomes shaped the myth to come. Observers mistook efficiency for aggression because silence lacked spectacle. A steady rescue operation sounded less dramatic than a clash of fighters, yet for the Navy, it validated every argument for extended-range doctrine. The so-called Battle of Karachi therefore reads not as an air duel lost to history, but as a full-scale rehearsal for the rapid response systems that would define modern naval logistics, and whose understated precision invited its own misunderstanding. The Mirages versus Skyhawks legend survives because spectacle consistently eclipses precision. The Irene Sincerity incident shows that naval expertise resides in coordination, energy management, relay timing, and data discipline, not destruction. Each sensor cue and command cycle formed a calculated choreography linking aircraft endurance to cruiser arrival times. Questioning such shorthand is essential. What history remembers as conflict often hides far more detail about logistics networks and quiet professionalism. If studied carefully, the Karachi rescue becomes not an anomaly, but an early template. Later search and rescue operations in the same sector would refine those very methods, extending their lineage across decades of maritime endurance.